Hello and welcome to the Oregonian Sports Podcast. Bill Oram from the Oregonian, joined as always by Brenna Greene from Coin 6. Brenna, this is our regularly scheduled podcast, but I'm going to go ahead and consider this an emergency podcast because there is a crisis happening here, and it's that the Portland Trailblazers are starting to resemble a competent basketball team. I'm not going to go so far as to say good, but they are persistently competent. And we've talked about, like, how aggressively they are tanking or how unaggressively they are tanking. But last night, you and I were both at Moda Center, and they, gave the Milwaukee Bucks work. Denny Advia looks like an all-star. Not quite, but very close. And I'm going to go ahead and say it, and we can touch on this later, but I wrote it in the Oregonian today. Chauncey Billups is turning out to be maybe pretty good at this. Which is a crisis in and of itself, although good for Chauncey. Thoughts on what you saw last night at Moda Center?
Man. It just I guess just I'm stunned that they're 5 of their last 6. Not that all those teams that they've played have been, incredibly fantastic. But yeah, it's not the time in the season that you want to be winning. You would rather have done this back in October and November, and maybe the situation would be different. But that was not what happened back in October or November, and now these wins are not advantageous long term. Because nobody wants to be in the middle of the lottery. Especially since this draft class, it doesn't look as strong as what originally hyped up for it to be, I would say.
Certainly not outside of the top 3, and maybe then there's another tier like 3 to 6, and then it's okay, continue.
Thank you for that sound effect. That was great.
I'm big on sound effects.
Okay, well, I'm sure our listeners love that more than anything. So, yeah, it's I don't know what's up. I mean, I do know what's up, but the Blazers with the Bucks, it's a different team. I mean, I believe I'm remembering right that even last year when they lost that first game against them in Milwaukee, it was relatively close.
Yes.
It wasn't like they got blown out. So ever since Damian Lillard has left, there is something there that connects. Yeah, I mean, this is just one of those things where you're kind of sitting there and you're like, well, I wish I could be happy about this. It is, as I think a lot of the fan base feels, it is very weird to be concerned about winning. What do you do with that?
So, it's interesting, because I detect a split among fans. Because when I write about this, I do hear from people who are basically like, that I'm Captain Negative because the Blazers are winning too much. And I am mindful of how miserable the last few years have been. Covering it has been difficult. Watching it has been difficult. You're ending seasons with, players who don't belong in the NBA starting games. I mean, just the nature of being in a rebuild where you're rebuilding through the draft. So I think these fans are entitled and should be able to enjoy a fun team. And I argued at the beginning of the year that I liked this roster to a point where I thought that, they could be fun bad. And I think they are fun bad. The problem is that they are not as they're more fun than they are bad. And there needs to be more bad in order for them to actually truly successfully rebuild through the draft.
For them to truly successfully be good.
Right, because mediocrity begets more mediocrity. It's a really difficult place to be in the NBA. And that's why there's so many interesting layers here because, you had a chance maybe to rebuild when you drafted Scoot Henderson. Scoot's been much better lately, and I don't want to take away the fact that he seems to be on an uptick and you want to invest in that. I don't think he's a franchise player, though. I don't think we've seen that. And so,
Yeah.
so you're still looking for that franchise player, and you're only going to find that player in Portland, most likely through the draft. And so I just have a hard time with the fact that the Blazers are currently sitting at 18-29. They have 12 more wins than the worst team in the NBA, which is Washington. And they have, at least 4 more wins than 6 other teams. Now, maybe Toronto's going to try to win down the stretch here. New Orleans, but like maybe at best the Blazers are getting to 5th in the lottery, like regardless of how aggressively they tank down the stretch. Even if they don't win another game, it's like they're still not getting to the top of the lottery or to the bottom 3 here. And like when that is your strategy and you are rebuilding through the draft, I think it's imperative that you give yourself every possible competitive advantage. And that means every single percentage point possible to have the best chance. And like, I understand that Atlanta got the number 1 pick last year from the 9th spot. Like that's, an incredible anomaly. You go back, I think the previous 5 teams were all in that, 14% bottom 3 to get the number 1 pick. It just gives you statistically the best chance, and you need to have the best chance. So it's such a conflict, like you were saying, where Brenna, last night was legitimately fun.
Yep.
Denny Advia, Tumani Kamara, are just delightful basketball players.
Yeah.
Scoot's been playing so much better. Shaden Sharp had a really good game offensively. Jeremy
Simons had a nice night.
And I was going to say, and Anthony Simons was making shots, right? And when he's making shots and the ball's moving, like it can actually be really pretty basketball. And it was. But my God, like beating the Bucks, like there's going to be games that you win because like you're playing Utah and like, whatever. There's other tanking teams. There's teams like the Blazers have gotten a lot of teams when they've rested their stars. Those are the kinds of games you can win. This did not feel like the kind of game the Blazers had any business being in. And so in one sense, it's a testament to what's happening in that locker room. Chauncey Billups, I think we have all viewed as sort of like a dead man walking here for years. He's doing something right. And I know that you can certainly pick apart, his acumen as a head coach, his X's and O's, his substitution patterns, the buttons he pushes with different players. But like this team won 21 games last year. They were picked to win 21 and a half in Vegas. Barring a really epic shutdown here, which I wouldn't rule out, but like they're going to blow past that. And on the level, like truly on the level, like if the Blazers like sprinted through the finish line, which I wouldn't expect them to do, they could potentially win 27, 29, 30 games.
Mm-hmm.
And like, again, that is a competent basketball team, but it's a terrible place for this franchise to be.
Yeah.
And so like, to me, it's almost funny, where like you're trying to be bad and you manage to accidentally be good, but you're not sustainably good. Like you don't have the pieces to like be like, okay, this is our squad and we're going to like next year we're going to contend, or next year we're going to try to make the play in. Like you're not there. And so I don't know. It's from an on-court standpoint, it's just going a little too well right now. Sorry to say, I will add they've won 5 of their last 6, as you said. Keep in mind that they've beaten a Chicago team that's not very good.
Yep.
Miami, which is in dysfunction with Jimmy Butler. Jimmy did play that game. Orlando's a good team. That was a nice win.
A lot of injuries.
I think that was Franz Wagner's first game back after missing several weeks. So, I mean, they were working him back in. Charlotte's tanking. They got smoked by the Thunder, and then they beat the Bucks in a major hype night with Dame back.
Yeah.
So Orlando's here tomorrow. Orlando's cooking again. Wagner's back in rhythm. Are they going to beat Orlando again? I don't know. But only because I don't know what to think about this team anymore.
They are in NBA no man's land.
Yeah,
currently,
absolutely.
There's the only thing there is like good things short term, but nothing good long term right now. And also the other thing is that the players who are playing well for this team are not going to get traded, and the players that are not playing so well overall are the ones they want to trade.
Yeah, how about DeAndre Ayton like rising up in a nationally televised game? Does he think 28 GMs are watching and suddenly going to have like a major change of opinion on him after 6 years of a body of evidence? I mean, DeAndre played decently well last night.
Yeah. And like I said, Anthony had a good night last night, but overall, he's had an okay at best season.
Oh, he's definitely taken a step back from where he was and where he's supposed to be.
Yes.
And that's certainly hurt his trade value. Jeremy Grant, what do you do with him? I mean, we've talked through all the scenarios, but the trade deadline is now 8 days away.
Yep.
And the Blazers have 4 or 5 players that they really should want to trade.
Mm-hmm.
And that's of their veterans. And that doesn't even get into whether or not maybe you take a call on Jabari Walker or Duop Reith, guys who are useful to you now, but like, they're low contract who other teams could maybe use, and you could get a second round pick or something like that. Like those sorts of deals exist as well. But like, obviously DeAndre Ayton's at the top of the list of guys you don't want on this team anymore. Jeremy Grant, Anthony Simons, Matisse Thybulle,
who has not played,
so is probably untradeable as well. And then Robert Williams, who is, like, talk about being in NBA no man's land.
Yeah.
Rob Williams is in no man's land. I'm pretty certain they're going to find a deal for Williams as long as they have a come to Jesus moment about what teams are going to be willing to trade. The Athletic had a mock scenario that I thought seemed fairly reasonable, all things considered, which was a 3-team deal with Houston and the Lakers. Would have Rob going to Houston, Jock Landale going to the Lakers, not the Lakers, the Clippers. Sorry, the Clippers, not the Lakers. Jock Landale to the Clippers, PJ Tucker from the Clippers to the Blazers. That's a buyout. PJ Tucker's not going to ever play for the Blazers in this scenario.
Yeah.
And then the Blazers get a second round pick from both those teams. It's not a great return, but you get a little bit farther away from the tax and you are stocking those assets. That's not what the Blazers thought they were going to get for Robert Williams when they insisted he be in the trade with Boston. But like, that's where as far as I've talked to people who think they know, like that his value is not going to be a first round pick. And maybe that changes as you get closer to the trade deadline. Maybe you get multiple teams, that are interested. Maybe you get like a heavily protected first back, and that's a win. But like, if that's your only action at the trade deadline, then this team remains in this like stasis. But again, there's multiple things happening. There's the team that's on the court right now playing basketball, and then there's the franchise and the franchise objectives and the team building. And right now they are not in the same place. I find it to be wildly entertaining.
Oh. It's fascinating. It's a fascinating NBA case study with all of the different parts that are at play. Especially I think the Chauncey part of it all. Somebody who we know, it would be an absolutely stunning turn of events to see him back here. So, he's just going out there and, I think the writing's on the wall, what's happening there. So he's just going out there and doing it. So you have that whole situation as well. It's not even just the franchise, it's also the head coach and what this all looks like as it keeps going down. And how much more does he want to keep winning? And yeah, it's truly one of the more low-key fascinating storylines in the NBA right now, and people aren't going to pay attention to it because it's Portland, and I understand. Why would they?
Yeah.
But it is a really fascinating mix of personalities and mix of objectives going on within the Portland Trailblazers.
Here's what's interesting about Chauncey. And I wrote about this off the game last night, so it's clearly where my mind is.
Mm-hmm.
He's had a rough go with the fans, with the franchise kind of from the beginning, right? His hiring was a mess. A lot of fans have never forgiven the Blazers for hiring him in the first place. That exists. He was hired to coach a team of veterans that, like, if you reflect back on it, it's insane that this was the Blazers team, like, just a few years ago. Like, it was Dame, CJ, Robert Covington, Norman Powell, Nurk. That was a team of veterans that was, like, prepared to go get it. And then before that year's over, you're trading off all those pieces. CJ's gone, everybody's gone except for Nurk and Dame. And then you tank at the end of that year, you tank at the end of the next year, you trade Dame, you tank at the end of last year. So Chauncey right now, he's in the 4th year of his 5-year contract. The 5th year is a team option. So right now, Chauncey Billups does not have any certainty or anything owed to him by the Blazers. So they could pick up his option. Nobody really thinks that's going to happen. Like, things have a natural life cycle. It seems like it's kind of coming to an end here. Like, how do you really sell to the fan base bringing back the coach who, at this exact moment, Brenna, after last night's win, is sitting with 99 career wins and 194 career losses, a winning percentage of .338. I don't know if there's any point to this exercise because I think it would ultimately be futile. But there are 4 coaches out of the 15 people who've ever been the head coach of the Portland Trailblazers, including the interims. There are only 4 of the 15 who have a worse winning percentage than Chauncey Billups. They are Kevin Pritchard, who was the interim for 27 games in 2005, Stu Inman, who was the interim coach in 1972, after they fired Roland Todd, who was the first coach when the Portland Trailblazers just were formed out of the ether, and he has a winning percentage of .297, which is worse than Chauncey, and then Jack McCluskey, who was the coach for 2 years in 73 and 74. Those are the only coaches that have had a worse record and winning percentage than Chauncey Billups. Caleb Canales, a better winning percentage than Chauncey Billups, who was the interim coach for
Portland
23
legend,
games.
Caleb Canales.
After they fired Nate McMillan, and that team was also terrible, 8-15. He was better in terms of win-loss percentage. So Chauncey has taken a lot of L's for this franchise. So if he's not the coach of the Trailblazers next year, he will be a free agent on the coaching market. He'll have options. Like, he could be a broadcaster. He's had options in the front office in the past. But, like, it seems like he wants to do the coaching thing. Like, it seems like that's what he likes to do. And so he's going to be a free agent, and his resume is going to say a winning percentage worse than PJ Carlissimo with the Portland Trailblazers. Worse than Caleb Canales is probably a better way to start. Worse than Lenny Wilkins in his 164 games. It's not very appealing on paper. So what incentive does Chauncey Billups, as an employee of the Portland Trailblazers, have to go out there and say, you know what? Winning this game against the Milwaukee Bucks is not our objective. Our real objective is being good in 3 years. This dude is trying to, save his career because he has no guarantee, and I don't blame him one bit.
No.
He should be coaching his ass off, just like the players should be playing their asses off. And this is the oldest adage, in that there are any old adages in the tanking era. Coaches don't tank and players don't tank. It's up to franchises and front offices to tank. Coaches are going to coach the best they can with the players they have. And the Blazers have given Chauncey Billups just enough to be not totally atrocious. And that's one of the things, Denny Advia is incredible. I could watch Denny Advia play basketball 15 hours a day. I still need my 8 hours of sleep. But I mean, Denny Advia is terrific. But this is part of why, people around the league are still baffled by that deal, where you are a tanking team trading out draft picks for a player that's going to make you better, but doesn't elevate you to, it's not a star player. You're not, going to build around him.
Mm-hmm.
And, I love Denny Advia. I'm glad he's on this team. I'm glad I get to watch him play basketball. I hope that the Blazers do get a star, so we get to see what Denny Advia looks like as the number 3 piece on a team that is anchored by Cooper Flagg or Dylan Harper. I hope that's what happens in Portland. But, he's made the Blazers more competitive than they should be.
Palatable.
And God damn it, if I can say that on this podcast. If not, Kelly Doyle bleeped it, and you'll have to fill in the blank as the listener. The Blazers are fun to watch right now. I took my family to the game on Sunday. First time I've taken my kids to a game since we've been back in Portland. My kids came to a game when I covered the Lakers in 2019. And my youngest son was a baby, and my oldest son was 4. He had just cut his own hair on Christmas morning, and he had this patch missing in his forehead.
Respect.
But this is the first time we've gone as a family, and it was a good experience. Not just because the game ops is better, or because the cotton candy was a hit with my kids. Like, Tumani Kamara is picking Shai Gilgeous-Alexander up full court. He's busting his hump. Scoot's playing better. Scoot's shooting, the ball well. It's they're still going to have their blowout losses. They're still going to get smoked. They're still going to lose a lot of games. But right now, I would say it's a pretty appealing product.
The Chauncey situation boils down to this for me. The Blazers have made it exceedingly clear that they are not loyal to him. So why in the world should he be loyal to them and their franchise wishes past when he is here? And that is the problem when you have a lame duck head coach and a draft like this one.
Which is why, like, if this was kind of how you planned to play this with Chauncey, maybe you should have fired him in the summer.
Yeah.
And
it feels much more crystal clear now.
Or fire him when you've lost 5 games in a row, or when he got blown out by 40 at home against a tanking Utah team that, at this moment, has won 7 fewer games than you. Like, there have been moments where you could sort of excuse yourself from this partnership, and it would make sense. Right now, you fire Chauncey Billups,
game?
in my opinion, you look really stupid because he's actually bringing it. Like, and again, I do not think he is a master tactician, with the clipboard. I think that he is still learning, but he also has learned and improved. And, we've always known that Chauncey Billups is a good communicator. As a player, he was a leader of men.
Mm-hmm.
It's natural that would carry over to coaching. Something he's doing is working. It's resonating in that locker room. And like, if I'm Jody Allen sitting up at Vulcan headquarters, that's terrible for the big picture vision, as we've hammered and alluded to and hit on. So I don't know where they go from here. I agree with you. Like, you have a coach who it's kind of the ultimate, like, poop or get off the pot situation with a coach. Like, you're either going to let him go or you're going to invest in him. The total body of work makes it really hard to invest in him. Again,
Agreed.
Because he has a career winning percentage as a head coach of 338, 99 and 194.
And
like,
I will play a bit of devil's advocate to that, but then I will also play devil's advocate back to that devil's advocate. One of the huge reasons why he has that winning percentage is because the team has decided to tank.
Totally.
Decided to tank. However, the reason why the team has decided to tank is a few different situations. I mean, for whatever reason under Chauncey, boy, have the injuries just been phenomenal. Sure. But finally, it feels like this year they've finally gotten out of that cyclone. Yes, please knock on something.
The advantage to having wood paneling in my house.
There we go. So, there's that. You could talk about that for sure, but generally the reason why they are in tanking situations is because they can't win in the first half of the season. So once again, the reason why you have the winning percentage that you do is because it's a reflection of what your team is like when
and the roster hasn't been good. The roster hasn't been good.
No.
Like they said, these have not been good teams. Like the Blazers had one team that, if healthy, should have been pretty competitive. And that was the team in 21-22 that was my first, 22-23, when they were like 500 going into February. Like they were sort of in the mix. They were overachieving, but then they shut it down. But like, that was the one team that was like, out there kind of getting after it, and then they shut it down and like completely pulled the rug out. But like, again, does that team finish with 40 wins instead of whatever it was, 27? That reflects differently on Chauncey. If Damian Lillard has offseason surgery in 2021 instead of midseason surgery and comes back in the middle of the season, are the Blazers trading Covington, McCollum, and Norman Powell? No, they're waiting for Dame to get back, and then they're like making a run for it at the end of the season. Maybe they get into the playoffs. Chauncey's career trajectory changes dramatically because he has had a team that was actually trying to win at the end of the season. He's never had that. So, one thing that I think is undeniable is that, Chauncey Billups has not had a fair shake here.
Mm-hmm.
it's been hard to learn, what kind of coach he would be with a competitive team. And if you had made, like, let's say that the Clippers had, like, the Lakers had hired, let's say the Lakers had hired Ty Lue from the Clippers instead of Darvin Ham. Like, they'd just gone all out, gotten Ty Lue to come across town. And the Clippers had said, okay, we're bringing Chauncey back. We're going to pay the Blazers a ton of money. We're going to take Chauncey back. Would Chauncey be seen as like this coaching nincompoop if he was coaching Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, and Ivica Zubac? Like, no. Like, I mean, he would be, and so, like, the situation has created some of the issues around him. Again, not a perfect coach. I want to stress that I'm not saying that Chauncey is like a mastermind, but I think that there are two ends of the spectrum here, and neither of them are quite true. It exists on a spectrum.
Can we go down more into the minutia, I guess, of last night and just watching the Damian Lillard experience round
Please.
2? Have
Please,
any thoughts?
So a few thoughts. One, I laughed internally a great deal when Chauncey was asked pregame about Dame's return, and he said, "The king is back." And I find this franchise and this city's relationship with Damian Lillard to be really kind of incredible. I mean, it's obviously super powerful. I know he means so much to so many people, but he's also a former player. The team moves on, and like still the biggest night of your year is when he comes back. Like, that feels unsustainable. Also, I was a little surprised there weren't more people there. I thought the crowd was a little thin, considering it's your one chance all season, barring a dramatic finals run from the Trailblazers, to see Damian Lillard play at Moda. So that surprised me. Like, I thought if I was going to shell out money for a game as a fan, the first one I'd be looking at would be the Bucks game.
Yeah.
So a little surprised about that. I mean, it just was different from last year for obvious reasons. Last year was the first time. The emotions were still so raw.
Yeah.
I thought it was nice so Dame got a really nice applause when he was introduced. It wasn't the minute-long standing ovation like last year. Totally understandable. I thought it was nice to see Dame go, say hello to Jody Allen, shake hands with Joe Cronin. I think that's the first time we've seen them interact since the trade. I don't think that's ever going to be a warm and fuzzy relationship, but like, life goes on. And I think that I hope that there's an appreciation on both sides of that fact. And like, of course it's personal. Business is personal, but like, the Blazers had to do what they did. And maybe Joe could have handled things about it differently. I'm sure Dame still wishes that they'd made something work with Milwaukee, with Miami. But
does he?
Life goes on. Oh, who knows? Who knows what that would have looked like? Is Jimmy asking out? Is Jimmy being a crybaby? If Dame had come, like, I mean, like, he would be playing with Bam. He would have, Jimmy. Like, I think that would have worked out fine. I don't know that Miami would be any further along than the Bucks. Like, the Bucks are 4th in the East right now. Like, they're nobody's favorite to win a championship.
Yeah.
But like, they'll be in the postseason. Like, assuming they're healthy, they'll have a chance. They should win a series. They should have a chance to win a couple of series. Like, it's not inconceivable to me that they could get to the finals. Like, I think it's a long shot, but it's not inconceivable. And Dame said all he wanted was a chance, right? He wanted a chance to compete. He's got that. So I think he should be happy with where he is. He's playing with one of the greatest players of this era. 2 of the greatest players of this era, if you count Splash Mountain, Brook Lopez. Love that guy. So
the Lopez brothers are 2 of a kind in the NBA.
I think ultimately this has worked out, especially for Dame. And as I wrote in a column yesterday, the Blazers also got what they wanted, for better or worse, right? Rebuilding is difficult, and they're finding that out very, very viscerally. It is a hard path, but that's what they chose by not, finding a way to build a contending team around Dame earlier. By the summer of 22, it was over. Like, it was just over by that. So I liked seeing a little bit of a thawing there. I had some questions kind of about what this all looks like going forward, but what about you? Like, what were your strong takeaways? Like, I mean, one of my questions going into it was like, is this a big deal anymore? Is it a big deal every year? Like, is this supposed to be an event every year?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I looked at my photographer and said last night, I said, are we coming back and covering this game next year? I don't know. Like this year, yeah, okay, it makes sense to do one more. Next year, I mean, you know, just from my perspective, which I don't really blame anybody for, but you know, the TV media is an interesting microcosm because especially because we cover so many things. So who shows up to what kind of signifies what is important and what isn't as important. And our station and K2 were there last night, and that makes sense why K2 was there. They're their TV partner, and KGW and KPTV were not. And this is not me throwing shade on anyone, just for the record. But you know, that kind of shows you what year 2 looks like in this situation. So year 3, like, are we back there for that game? You know, like, obviously I look back on last year and it's a situation where there was, understandably a lot more hype around it. And I just look at the workload I had last year for that game compared to the workload I had this year for this game. And it is night and day. I mean, I had 2 pregame live shots and that was it. And I had to ask my manager the day before. I said, "Do you want me in the 4?" They said, "Yeah, we'll put you in the 4." But, you know, I had to ask. Last year, obviously, I'm not asking if you want me in the 4 or not. I'm going to be in the 4 p.m. show. And then I'm going to be in the 5A block. And then I'm going to be in 5 Sports. And then I'm going to be in the 6 o'clock show, too. And last night, it was, you're in the 4B block. So you've been demoted from the A block to the B block. And you're in 5 Sports. And that's it. And then you're in 10 and 11, obviously, after the game. You know, and by the way, last year when Portland won, oh, guess what? You're in the A block of the 10 and the 11. This is our lead story tonight. They win again this year? You're in the sports block. That's fine. Which I don't have any issues with, for the record, but that just shows you how much things can change in one year and how much I think things can change, next year. I really don't know if we're at this game next year. Probably, but I don't know. So
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Go ahead.
I think that's kind of up to the Blazers.
Yeah.
And I think it's the Blazers' job to make their other games more important than Damian Lillard's return.
Mm-hmm.
Because right now, like, you can look at the schedule and, like, the only thing that differentiates one game from another for a tanking team is who the opponent is. Like, who can I see?
Yep.
Like, I might buy a ticket to go see Shea. I might buy a ticket to go see Paolo Banchero. I might buy a ticket to see, LeBron. I might buy a ticket to see the Jazz if I'm a Colin Sexton super fan. But, like, there's no difference functionally from one Blazers game to the next. These are all games that sort of exist for the same purpose, which is to get through the season and to the other side and get to the lottery and hope for the best. So Dame's return right now is the biggest event. The Blazers need to be their own event. And they aren't there yet. And that comes with time, continuity, smart roster building, and probably a little bit of luck in the lottery. If you are as fun as you were last night and you add, again, like, I feel like this is becoming a long shot, but, like, you drop Cooper Flagg in the middle of that, people are going to see that, and there's going to be bigger nights than Dame's return because the franchise and the fan base will have moved on. The franchise has not given the fan base anything to move on to.
Yes.
And that's why it felt so cringe. I'll say cringy to me that Chauncey started his press conference by saying the king is back, because it's true. Like, Dame is the king in the Blazers kingdom right now because nobody has come in behind him. So Damian Lillard's still the best thing the Trailblazers have, and they don't have him. So they need to figure out what's next. And they're still in that process. And it was always going to be sort of a clunky, long, process. They have to unwind a bunch of stuff. But, like, I also feel like the Blazers have created some problems along the way for themselves. I really, really probably should give DeAndre Ayton a break. But you didn't have to take on DeAndre Ayton. Now, you don't get Toumani Camara without DeAndre Ayton, so I'm not saying it didn't have some payoff here. But, like, you didn't need to do that. You know, you didn't need to give Jeremy Grant a 5-year contract. Unless there was a guarantee there, which was also a mistake. So you don't need to give Jeremy Grant that contract. You know, you probably should have traded Robert Williams sooner. You don't need to match the offer sheet on Matisse Thybulle. Like, you are rebuilding through the draft. It is okay to let those things go because all it's done is gunked up your drain. Like, the Blazers need Drano down the pipes of their roster to clean out the gunk so the water in the scenario of the players that they actually like and want to build around can flow freely.
The only other thought that I really had last night that was very clear was, boy, is it nice to be at a basketball game and not be at an event that also features a basketball game. Because that's how it kind of felt last year. Through no one's fault, by the way.
Yeah.
It kind of had to go that way. You know, it was the week of Damian Lillard in Portland. You had the Adidas event where they named a court after him. You had a pregame press conference, which I have never seen with a player before up at the podium. But, you know, like, I get it. I'm not upset about it, you know? It was the right decision to make.
That was like a finals setup.
Yes.
Like, that would be like if the Blazers ever host the finals at Moda Center, like that's where they will set up the media room for the finals, so you can accommodate 100 members of the media.
Yes, it was wild. You know, you had 2 videos for Dame last year that they played. Not 1. They hit him with 2.
There were none last night, right? There wasn't anything like that.
I don't recall anything, but I also was working on a different piece during the game, so I
don't think there was, and it would be, you know, I would say it would be atypical. Like, you wouldn't do that again.
No.
Like, I've never seen that for a returning player. But it's also, like, for him, like, I could see you doing a...
he's the king!
I could see you doing it again, being like, hey, let's take a trip down memory lane with Damian Lillard back in town. Like, I could see the Blazers game ops doing that. Yeah. By the way, a few things about game ops last night. Blazers are on TNT, right? They're one nationally televised game. I was at the Blazer game like 53 hours earlier against the Thunder with my kids. Wow, they pull out all the stops for a national TV game. The volume on the pregame cranked way up. Because I think Blazer games are too loud anyway.
They are.
I did not, like, I would have been like diving over my children to cover their ears if they'd been there last night. It was so loud.
It was awful.
Then the fireworks are going off in the arena. The flames are shooting out of the scoreboard like it's a playoff game. And I'm like, again, this speaks to that whole notion of like, this is the biggest game you have.
Yeah.
Because it's Dame. And like, that speaks to the lack of progress from the organization. That this is the one game of the year that you pull out all these stops. So, I mean, it's where they are. It is what it is. You know, the franchise obviously needs to get busy. Like, that's just what it is. You know, another year of this. I mean, we said this a year ago. We said this 2 years ago. We said this 3 years ago. This is miserable. Another year of this is going to be more miserable. And even though the team is more fun right now, and the wins have been fun to watch, there's still this cloud hanging over the whole situation because you can't even enjoy the wins. Because if you enjoy the wins, you've got people like us saying, this is bad. Because it is bad.
Yeah, the volume in that arena makes me feel
Too
like
much.
I have a toddler dancing around in my brain. It is just...
We're not old people, Brenna.
No. I'm 30. I'm 33. Okay, like I can tolerate something that's loud. I mean, I went to the Brat concert there a few months ago. That was loud. You know, like, but it's just I don't know. There's, oh my god.
Do you know that I once walked out of a Harry Styles concert because it was too loud?
Okay, well now I feel like your opinion card has been revoked in this situation.
It was too loud. Now listen, let me tell you. I was there for Casey Musgraves, who was opening. I really only went because my wife and I wanted to see Casey Musgraves. We'd never seen her perform before. It was at the Forum. Harry Styles was a bonus. Let me tell you what was good about the Harry. And listen, I think Harry Styles is awesome. Like, I actually got into his music after that show, so I did feel a little bit bad about leaving because I listened to that album after the show more, and I was like, this is really good. But it was way too loud. But the best part about going to a Harry Styles concert, at least 8 years ago or whatever it was, nobody in the beer lines. Like, I mean, you go to like any other concerts, like you're standing in line for like 15 minutes waiting to buy a $30 beer or whatever your pleasure may be. Harry Styles concert, everybody's 13. I'm walking straight up to the beer line, not even getting asked to show an ID. You are clearly old enough, sir. Here you go.
I'm thrilled for you and your Harry Styles experience, except for the fact that you had to walk out.
Yeah, there was only one direction for me, and it was out of there. Also, you don't have to wait for the Uber line when you leave early. Like, the Uber driver was like, so soon?
Oh, man, I'm going through it with the puns. Jesus Lord.
I may need to, here's what I'll say. I need to become an earplug person.
I know. I was looking at Sean Highkin's earplugs last night, and I was like, you are the smartest man in this building.
I used to cover the Lakers with Mike Bresnahan, who now does Lakers TV. And, Mike was, a few years older than me, 10 years, 12 years, 15, 20 years older than me, Brez. I don't know. You're probably not listening, but you might be 20. And Brez would always have his little earplugs, and they'd be sticking out of his ears. And I was like, what a goof. Now I get it. Now I'm 20 years older than I was, and I want those earplugs too.
Yeah, no, it's a legitimate thought that maybe I try to invest in some earplugs before the trade deadline.
I don't want to be a deaf old man for the.
I know.
For the 18 and 29 Portland Trailblazers. Like, I'm not giving up one of my 5 senses for this team.
I agree with you.
It's the finals, and I go deaf watching the Portland Trailblazers bring the second championship to this city. Maybe I could tolerate it under those circumstances, but not for this team. No way.
With you there. Yeah. So anyways, it was nice to just watch to not have to deal with all of the hoopla this year. Last year was extremely stressful. And it was stressful for us, which means I can't even think about what it was like for Damian. And also, he was home for multiple days before that game. So he was getting pulled in every single direction humanly possible.
They rolled in at 2 a.m. yesterday morning from Utah.
Exactly. So that, even though I feel bad for him that he didn't get to, stay here as long as before, maybe it was kind of nice to just not have to be like, look, this is my schedule and I only have time for my children and that's it.
I didn't ask what their schedule was, but I'm assuming they stayed over. Only because, one, that's become much more common in the NBA rather than traveling after games when you have a day off. And also because Dame was here. I assume they gave him the night and like a midday flight to San Antonio because I believe they play Friday in San Antonio. They do
play Friday.
So I bet they left at like noon and flew into San Antonio, which is nice. Like Dame got like a night in his bed, presumably.
Perfect. That's the perfect amount of time for Damian to be like, I've got to maximize every single second I have with my kids and everybody else can just fluff off.
That's what I said.
Mm-hmm. So, I think it was probably a little bit more, it was just less overwhelming, and that was kind of at least nice to see. So maybe it becomes, next year, it's not the king is back, just not because the Blazers have given us a reason, because I feel very doubtful that they're going to give us a reason, but maybe just because the nostalgia will wear off even more, because it obviously has worn off a bit, which is fine. That's what it should be.
I have a question for you. And then we're going to get out of here. But I like this question. And I think it's something we're going to talk about more in the coming years.
Yes.
Dame has a guaranteed year next year on his contract. And he has a player option the next year that's $58 million. At 36 years old, I do not think he's going to be opting out of a $58 million contract. He will be a free agent in 2027.
Yes.
Damian Lillard has said on the record multiple times that his goal is to finish his career with the Blazers, to sign here and finish his career back and forth. This did not come up last night. This is not a current talking point.
No.
But it is the established, it is the status quo fact that is his expectation and goal. In 2027, when Scoot Henderson is 23 years old, Shaedon Sharpe is also 23 years old. They've gone through at least one more lottery, probably two. Denny Advia will be in the last year of his contract. Maybe you give him an extension. Theoretically, you should have a fully developed squad. Okay?
Okay.
Damian Lillard, agent Aaron Goodwin, picks up the phone and calls Joe Cronin and says, Dame's ready to come home. Do the Blazers want him? Let's assume that he's healthy. Because there's versions of this, right?
Exactly.
He could be at 37, he could be, so diminished that it's obvious that he's coming back for KG with the T-Wolves type role. Let's assume that Dame still wants to be a starter in the NBA and a lead option at 37, which, given what we know about aging guards,
I was going to say.
Maybe not likely, but let's give Dame the benefit of the doubt that he's still playing at a, close to an all-star level.
Okay.
The Blazers the Blazers are a playoff team in this scenario. They've developed into a team that is in the back half of the playoffs.
I think you bring him back if he's willing to come off the bench. If he's not willing to come off the bench, then what would you be achieving by putting him in the starting lineup and not getting whoever your point guard is at that point the reps that they need? Because the likelihood that it will be a young point guard is extremely high. So you are only more if you bring Damian Lillard back in that situation and you start him, you are mortgaging your future. So, I think if he came back and said, I'll come off the bench, I'll back up, I'll help tutor, I'll help, do that sort of thing, then yeah, I think it's worth it. But is it worth it to sacrifice your overall future for 1 to 2 more years of Damian Lillard? No.
Diminishing returns of Damian Lillard, too.
So, I do think that no matter what, worst comes to worst situation, Damian Lillard will sign a 1-day contract and retire a Blazer.
Sure. Fair.
But, yeah, I don't think that you could ever... Yeah, no, I feel that now. If he was if Aaron Goodwin called and now said, hey, we'd like to bring Damian back.
Let's work out a trade. He wants to play with Denny.
Then I still think you have to say he can't start for us. Because you've already seen that he is slowing down a bit. He's been better this year than he was the year before.
Totally.
I'll give him that.
Give him that. He's been very efficient. He's averaging 25 points a game. He's shooting the ball well. Still 34 years old.
Yeah. So,
you heard it here first, folks. Damian Lillard, Portland doesn't want you. If you think you're coming back here, boy, do we have news for you. And you learned it from the Oregonian Sports Podcast and host Brenna Greene that Portland does not want you back. Did I get that right?
Yes, please. Everybody aggregate that.
I will say, obviously, there's so many variables to this, and that's why I like it as something to talk through.
Yeah.
Because I don't see how you could possibly bring him back if he has expectations of being a featured player.
Yeah.
Unless you're just in total disarray and you have nothing else, and you are basically a total strip down. And you want to let him go, shoot 35 times like Kobe in his last year and let him go out that way for better or worse. And then you're kind of rebuilding underneath that. Maybe there's a world where that works, but it would be it would mean that the current rebuild that we're witnessing went completely sideways and was a total disaster. That 3 years down the line, they're doing it all again. So I think that there will be a time where, the Blazers have to confront the question of if Dame is serious and sincere, and I think he is in his heart, right? The league and the world can present different scenarios, but I think that that's what he wants. I think it's very possible there will come a time where the Blazers have to ask, can we go down this road? And I think, we'll be having this conversation in a not humorous, not theoretical way, 2 years down the road. Like, is this going to be a good decision for the Blazers to sign him to the mid-level exception and bring him back? And the answer could very well be, no, it is not. And that's going to be a really interesting inflection point. It's going to be a really interesting question for Blazer fans who, as you know, have kind of become, certain fans, Dame first, team second. And it's just going to be really interesting to see where things stand 2 years from now if that situation does present itself.
Mm-hmm. Can I just make one more note before we leave here?
Please do.
Let me just pull up my phone for one thing. I want to look up one thing.
I know what's coming.
You know what's coming? Yeah. You do know what's coming. I served my mea culpa last week. Last night, Gonzaga beat Oregon State 98-60. Annihilation. And that's all I have to say. Cocky Gonzaga fan Brenna is back. We're back on track, baby.
We almost made it a week without a Gonzaga reference, but you know what? This one was well deserved. I made you eat lots of crow last week, and so you deserved a little bit of a victory lap for that one. Good for you and the Zags.
Ben Gregg having a great last few games. Actually, he didn't really have he had an okay game last night, but he had a great game at UP. And
still a Clackamas legend.
Still always a Clackamas legend. Always a Clackamas legend. Anyways, 55% from the field, 53% from three. I ain't upset about it. So anyways, I had to, after, I very willingly ate crow last week. I deserved it. I should have done it. I needed to do it. That's what a good fan does. But you know what? Also, a good fan hypes her team up when they had a nice win. So, insane.
Brenna's back on the front foot, folks. We're happy for her. All right. Thank you so much for listening to the Oregonian Sports Podcast. I'm Bill Oram, joined by Brenna. It's Brenna Greene today. Brenna Greene. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next week. We'll be back next week. We'll be talking about the inevitable firing of Chauncey Billups for winning too many games and whatever else might be going on and presenting itself by that time. We have the trade deadline.
Yep.
We're going to find out next week if the Blazers are able to get stuff done, or if we're talking about this same group of players the rest of the season. And that's going to be a real slog if it's the case. All right, Brenna, thank you so much. We'll talk next week.
Bye.